Warning, I swear a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Library of Ruina Book Club. Hod has once again put me in front of her librarians to tell them stories from the books we have so painstakingly gathered, and while most of them are asleep, and the ones that are awake are not paying attention, I will nevertheless take on this role with dutiful enthusiasm, including the fact that I actually missed the entry on the Grade 8 Fixer page 3 last time, and will rectify that right now. For one to start working as a fixer, they must acquire a license issued by the Hana Association, the first association in the Order. The set of skills required to get a fixer's license is quite different from those needed to pass wing entrance exams. One is about physical fitness, while the other is more about mental prowess, so to speak. There are exceptions, of course, but this is generally the case. After acquiring the license, the fixer must join an office. After all, it's nigh impossible for a no-name fixer to take jobs on their own. Choosing the right office is also important, but you can worry about that later. Only the skilled ones can afford to make choices, like decline offers from offices or ask to be transferred to another. Newcomers who've only just become fixers, or incompetent planks who can't handle their work properly, should be content with any office that accepts them. So on top of the general low level of life expectancy for new fixers and not great prospects, they also don't really get to make their own choices. You take the first office that's willing to take you, basically, or I guess you'd probably end up more like maybe you'd end up in a syndicate or just an unusually skilled rat. I don't know, but it's clear safety in numbers. It's the case for every single organization and faction in the city. And when you're starting out as a grade 9, grade 8 fixer, you're not spoilt for choice. Take what you can get. But we move on now fully to the Urban Plague, and the first one on the list is one I'm actually very interested in, which is the Dawn Office, because Una and Salvador are rad as hell, and I'd love to learn a bit more about them. Audio transcript of testimony from District 22, Resident 1, omitted. I think it was last Monday. Derry said something strange to me. They told me they made a contract with someone and they're scared that they might break it. They said they don't know what horrifying penalty they'll have to face upon breaking the contract. I tried to calm them down, saying they should be fine as long as they don't actually breach the contract, but Derry got ticked off and complained that it's unfair how they're supposed to comply with unfavorable terms hidden in the fine print. Then they broke into tears, saying they're doomed anyway. They apparently agreed to do 3 tasks in exchange for gaining power, omitted. Audio transcript of testimony from District 22 Resident 2, file name, Do I have to recall that messed up memory? Alright, if it's necessary to prevent another incident from happening, I guess there's no choice. You can record it, sure. I remember everything that happened, actually. That day was just like any other. Except Derry showed up in the streets after going missing for a few days, looking awfully gaunt. Other than that, the weather was normal, and the streets were the same as always. I know, that's when the incident started. Derry was walking the street as they mumbled something, but they didn't seem to be heading to a specific destination. It's like they were staring off into space and forcibly dragging their feet along. They said strange things like something keeps coming, or boiling. They were always a bit of a weirdo, so that didn't bother me too much, but then Derry's body began swelling up. All I could think at that moment was how funny they looked, expanded like a balloon. The scene was that unrealistic. Maybe it was the shock of confronting an unbelievable situation paralyzing the human brain, or the brain beginning to believe that it's only a dream and marveling at the scene, but I was just standing still staring at what was going on. Am I really in reality? But before I could gather myself up, the incident happened. Derry's body blew up and weird needles went. Mrs. Madrid, who was standing in front of me, was struck with one of the needles, and her body swelled up and exploded into a shower of needles, just like Derry did. I luckily managed to get away without getting hit by any needles. I ran right to this office without turning back once, and now, I don't think I can get back there. I wonder if anyone else lived, if my friend Mission's alright, if my house is fine. I'm curious, but I just can't go back. I can't do it. What do? I don't want to go back to. The interviewee's breath becomes coarse and unstable afterwards. The recording was suspended as it was deemed that the interview could no longer proceed. Interesting. Especially interesting because it doesn't seem overly relevant to Una. But it must be in regards to some job they did, or something significant. The needles sound familiar, but I just can't place where it came from. It does sound familiar. Let me look into this, right? Let me look into this for just a moment. Yes, the 1,000 needles. I had to assume it was the job that Una went on that they were referencing in her book, her page. For some reason, I was getting it confused with the 8 o'clock circus, but that was the one the Wedge office went after before they went to the library. Indeed, what they're doing now, which is why they can't join Dawn in actually going there. This is going to be a bit different, I suppose, right now, whereas as I try to get to the bottom of this one, because I don't feel good just reading the book going, oh, I think that's a thing, but I can't remember, and then just leaving it. Brainstem focused resonator, and these are all the needles, of course, from the people who were struck and then exploded. So there was a lump, some kind of creature that was actually shooting out the needles, which was then hitting people and causing more needles to explode out of them. Culprit behind that was... Yesterday's promise. I was wondering because Derry mentioned a contract with a fine print that he didn't read, or they didn't read. Yeah. So it seems like yesterday's promise is capable of creating distortions. That's at least the impression I'm getting. Okay, we're done here. But I'm glad I looked that up. I wanted to know. Okay, so yes, it was in reference to the 1,000 needles, and the 1,000 needles came from yesterday's promise. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's move on to Salvador then. It's case name 1,000 Needles. Wow, this is a continuation. Alright, cool. Good. We'll learn more right now. Case name 1,000 Needles. Serial code DN00113. Grade Urban Legend. Date of occurrence meh. This document is a compilation of relevant information on the case of the 1,000 Needles, which occurred in the back streets of District 22. While a clear conclusion on this case is yet to be made, it is speculated to be a case of the distortion, based on the apparent inability to confirm the cause or analyze the composition. Case report, Entity A01, the first apparent source of the incident, was wandering the back streets of District 22 before swelling up and exploding. Numerous needles were dispersed upon the explosion, flying in all directions. The needles which stuck onto building walls caused the site of impact to melt and crack. When a human was struck with one of the needles, they were transformed into A02, going through the same bizarre process of detonation A01 did. The orange symbol on the nape of A01's neck was also found on the needles discharged from its body. When I arrived at the scene after taking the request, the bits of flesh scattered around the streets began to merge into one giant body using a brainstem-focused resonator, becoming a 3-meter tall, 10-foot mass that I will refer to as A03. A03 began throwing large needles, the length of which varied from 1 to 3 meters. Unlike the small needles fired from the explosion of A01 or A02 that could only leave small dents on building structures, the giant needles flung by A03 caused buildings to helplessly melt. In addition, local residents who stared into the entity's eyes or holes in its body soon produced a boiling sound before turning into A02, so I had to forbid people from observing it closely. A01 visited 00 office to give a request 4 days prior to the incident. Refer to audio transcript of testimony from a fixer of 00 office. Judging by what they said, such as made a deal with the devil and terrible things will happen if I break the contract, it is speculated that yesterday's promise is behind the incident. Audio transcript of testimony from a fixer of 00 office. I'm fine. Can I just talk like this? Oh, okay, got it. When was it? A person visited our office last Wednesday, if memory serves me right. They introduced themselves as an ordinary resident of the back streets of District 22 and said they urgently needed help. There were huge bags under their eyes, and their hair was a tangled mess. Their eyes were lifeless and blurry, and there was some sort of symbol on their neck, as if they'd been attacked by a Stigma Workshop product. The desperation was palpable. They couldn't even walk straight, and they were straining to approach me with their awkward steps. I managed to calm them down, and they said, "I'm sorry, I'm not sure how I should explain it." In short, they made a contract with a devilish person of some kind, and they're scared that they might break the contract, so they were now asking us to take care of the devil so it can't kill them as punishment. I still don't get what that was about, even though I'm talking about it. To be frank, I just couldn't understand what they were saying, not just because their level of knowledge and manner of speech was lamentably inferior, no. All they uttered was a series of simple words, but the splendid images delivered in those hysteric words they let out like they were possessed by something. I can't dare to try to describe them. They kept saying confusing things like, we'll skewer people's heads and make a necklace out of them to offer to it. They keep getting closer, they're multiplying in numbers, they're approaching from inside me, all with a mysteriously bright glint in their eyes. Oh, our office records counseling with our clients by principle. You'll see how confusing the whole situation was if you give this file a listen. Don't worry, we record them with the client's consent and everything, so there's nothing illegal about this. Refer to evidence 51, 00 office counseling audio recording. But what can I do, really? The whole deal with the devil thing just sounds too unrealistic. I honestly thought they were lying, so I made up an excuse to turn them away. Considering the reasonable level of, importance and relevance that Salvador and Una both had due to the situation with Philip, I'm kind of surprised that their book entries focus on this 1,000 Needles situation and yesterday's promise, although of course yesterday's promise is significantly more important than either Salvador, Una, or the 1,000 Needles. But it's an interesting case, for sure. And Una handled this herself, I'd like to point out. She dealt with this by herself. She was a really good fixer. I really like her. Shame she's dead. Shame she's quite dead. We're gonna move on to the others and then start continuing to work our way down the offices. Bah, every part of my body's aching. Cloudy bastards, why are they picking at us so much? We've taken some serious damage on our side. Heard the Blade's lineage, or Blade lineages, also got messed up. Got any news? Heard our boss is going to go out and talk to him. If boss is going alone, wouldn't that be dangerous? The other side's also sending their top dog or whatevs. No need to worry about the boss. Right, they're weaklings individually. That's why they like to move in packs. I have no idea. Truly, I have no clue. Cloudy bastards, I don't know who that is. I can't even remember who Blade lineage is, or can I? Aha! Yeah, it's these guys. Okay. Right, that's Blade lineage. So, the Rusted Chain Links and Blade lineage were fighting someone, and didn't do very well. So, but I don't know who Cloudy Bastards are. I guess that means like high up, like fancy people. But it doesn't give us a good indication as to who they are. This doesn't provide much context in general, really. Jesus Christ. The Rusted Chains ain't the biggest syndicate, but each member's got strength to boot and boast. The only weapon we use is these spiky chains. Tie 'em, smack 'em, anything goes. We gotta be careful not to get swung or swayed around or bind ourselves with our own metal. My body's full of scars thanks to that, but hey, it's not too bad, is it? Well, considering that practically every chain link card results in taking, you know, self-bleed, inflicting self-bleed, I'd imagine it is quite bad. But then again, Jikan gets a massive power bonus for, suffering that much bleed. In fact, if we could just have a quick look at Jikan's page, as I know it's around here somewhere. Dice gain +1 power for every 5 stacks of bleed on self. Which is potential, but you take that bleed damage every time you swing, so would Jikan potentially work well with Grit and Singular Strike? But then again, do their cards work well with Singular Strike? That's the question. Because you gotta inflict bleed on yourself or it don't do nothing. You know? Well, I mean, that works, but that's not really enough. Because you're required to inflict bleed on yourself, or this doesn't work. Well, with Now Die, you can immediately proc the effects of Sublimate, and then you could just have, like, I don't know. Then again, Singular Strike doesn't really need more power. That's not the weakness of Singular Strike, is it? The weakness is you only get one fucking die. It's an idle idea, it's an idle thought. Let's not worry about it too much. Let's move on. In the city, there are as many workshops as there are unique gadgets, and the Tray Association, which is one I've not heard of before, but that is Spanish for 3, so the 3 Association, is the one responsible for managing those workshops in general. It reviews newly designed weapons, files applications to the head, and charges taxes for them. You can't use the weapons that haven't passed their evaluation. Getting a rejection from them basically means they see the weapon as something that shouldn't be used in the city. They aren't too cold about it though. They sometimes send the applicants feedback about how they can improve their designs to a passable level. Not that we need it, since our latest weapon passed on the first try. So that's interesting, actually, because once again it plays into the whole head monitoring new weapons development to make sure that we don't end up in a horrible arms race that literally levels the city. But I kind of like that the office, you know, that receives these weapons and reviews them, does send back feedback as to how the weapon can be modified to be compliant with the rules set by the head for new weapons. That's surprisingly, proactive of them. I figured they just send it back with a flat no on it and be done with it. But I do love the workshop-affiliated fixes, I have to say. Those explosive spears are very cool. And you know what? This outfit, actually, is pretty damn cool. I had this on Malkuth for ages because I thought she looked great with it. But they're cool guys and gals. I like them. Most residents in Nest J are relying on a special entity. I can't talk much about it, but it's like the fortune readings others sometimes see. It predicts the events that'll happen to you during a year like an annual fortune and gives opinions on immediate matters. It never gives a direct solution to your problems though, it's up to you to make your choices, but I cannot deny that it has a strong influence on your decision. This is the nest of gambling. You hear all sorts of noises daily, it almost drives you mad. Gunshots and screams aren't exactly swell to wake up to. Those sounds used to wake me up every day, but not anymore. The person living in room 1829 vanished after losing a bet a week ago, and I saw him carrying a large coffin out of room 1831 yesterday. The nest of gambling. Makes sense given their playing style and the reference to Hanafuda, but how the fuck are they all... How does that place function? Well, you know, for every lost bet is someone who won, I suppose, but man, not stable. In the nest of gambling, hundreds of games take place every day, the humans leaving as winners or losers. Some admit their defeat, while others try to make a scene and escalate it into a violent mess. It's the job of officers like ours to monitor the gaming between individuals or organizations, verify the results, and prevent situations from turning violent. There are naturally a lot of officers that handle this kind of work, most of them being affiliated with the UFI Association, ours included. That's another association I've never heard of. Whenever a game happens with something at stake, a go-between needs to be there to prove that the results were legitimate. Given the sheer number of games, we're short-handed sometimes. Especially now that I've destroyed Hanafuda and the Zhong office, which is pretty funny. But that place is screwed up. You can't base a society or a community or anything around gambling. It is by its nature unstable. I don't know. Fun idea though. Bono, you absolute legend. People are hung up on money, but it's not just because they want to be well off. The formidable tax burden is a big part of why. No matter how humble your job is, you're still obliged to pay your duties if you earn money. It goes for every type of business transaction. Even syndicates are no exception. Anyone living in the city has to pay taxes. If you don't meet the deadline, you'll get a warning. For the first 3 offenses, you'll get a notice of warning and no other penalty. But if you don't pay your taxes for the 4th time, then you're dead meat. They'll come for you. The eye will seek out tax evaders by any means. And the person it sends will rip those poor cheats to shreds. Surprisingly real, I suppose, although at least these people get 3 chances. But yeah, considering money is one of the main ways to actually ensure safety and security in the city and to grow in strength, and then having to pay exorbitant taxes is an effective way to ensure that no one really gets strong enough to do anything and the state stays rich. Very clever, head. Nice one. The nest is a home where birds brood their eggs. They use their wings to devotedly protect their eggs from outside threat. Such is the role of the nests and wings that constitute the city. Do the eggs represent people inhabiting the nest then? Not a chance. These eggs are the treasures that wings possess. Singularities, technologies that make money, featured in countless patents. Its residents are nothing more than feathers of the wings that serve to protect the eggs. A wing will end up falling when it loses too many of its feathers, but it won't bother to desperately protect all of its feathers, since a feather or 2 will naturally grow back. They're basically expendables. Of course, everyone thinks that getting to the nests is the ticket to safety, but the fact of the matter is that the heads of the nests really don't care about the people there. They're as expendable as, like, backstreet dwellers. It is all about the, you know, the technologies, the money, the unique features of each nest and wing. People remain expendable, I'm not remotely surprised. Kane Office is a notary public office that officially administers various matters when a contract is made between 2 offices. A notary public office preserves evidence involved in contractual processes and certifies legal issues. Sometimes the office may play the role of a broker. When you work with Kane Office, the process you have to follow will usually be simple outside of a few special cases. All you need to do is make a summary of all the details for the deal you're making and visit the office. And don't forget to take all the relevant documents with you. Notarial deed of promissory note, migration permit for the nest, or the backstreets, of District 00, deed of forward contract, and everything else related to the deal. If you've safely finished your business with Kane Office, those documents will become powerful pieces of evidence that will protect you in case a dispute breaks out for whatever reason. So Kane Office are like the lawyers of the fixers, really. Maybe lawyers is not quite the right term, but law representatives at the very least, something along those lines. And then of course, as we learned, Kane Office themselves are pretty fucking shifty, as everyone is, and we're attempting to gather more knowledge to play wings against each other. Pretty standard, to be honest, it doesn't surprise me. I miss Gay's office, they were very cool. I love Bono. I love his suit, I love his Daft Punk-esque helmet, I love the tentacles, very cool. But I do love the Kurikumo clan, I have to say. You hear that news? We're about to collide with kingfishers again. Kingfishers? Don't remember that name at all. Were they a real thing? You know, the syndicate that's been struggling with finance and feuds between members recently. They seem to be getting back on their feet after raiding the Constellas, but it looks like that didn't last long. They were irrelevant chumps, so I completely forgot about them. The Knots seem to be after them. Maybe they finally hit them. Weaklings will get hounded. And now they've been trying to invade our territory, desperate to loot anything. Doesn't matter, their names wouldn't be so unmemorable if they were any strong. Taking them down shouldn't be a problem. And the fixers at Clam office that were cooperating with them from the back are gone too. Clam? What are they about? So I quite like the idea of, if I was to play a game in regards to operating in the city, of being involved in like proper syndicate gang warfare, because it would get so, it looks like it gets so complicated. There are so many players, so many factions, and the idea of like diplomatically and militarily navigating your way through them sounds very interesting. It reminds me of playing Total Warhammer 3, which has like 250 factions at the start of the game, and then usually has like 120 by turn 20. But I like the idea of that, managing all these different factions and interests, making alliances, breaking them, teaming up, doing whatever. So it's just very interesting to me. A fallen nest no longer has an owner to protect its inhabitants. What happens to them then? In the wreckage of the nest that's gradually turned into an environment similar to the backstreets, all they can do is accept horrible deaths, as backstreet residents do, or hire a fixer, or pay protection fees to one of the powerful syndicates to enter the nest and be under their care. Some move to a different wing, but this is an exceptionally rare case. The syndicate may charge ridiculous expensive fees, but they'll keep you safe for sure once you pay them. If an even stronger fixed syndicate comes in, drives off the others and asks you to pay a protection fee, then there's no choice but to give your new protectors what they ask for. They'll protect you with their lives as long as you still have money to pay. The assets will become useless when you die anyhow, so you may as well just spend it to extend your life for just a little longer. The former feathers don't have a choice in this matter. If they don't pay the fee, they'll die or get kicked out. It would be a miracle to walk out unharmed. So despite how elite members of nests are considered to be, situations in which a nest member moves to another nest is exceptionally rare, so once they lose their protection, they are very much on their own, and they are basically a backstreet denizen. That's unfortunate. Fortunately, such selfless people like the Kurakumo clan are on hand to protect those people, and it's a vicious racket, isn't it, really? God damn. Jin's a cool guy, though. I like him. He's very cool. But I think of the two, Yang was my favorite. I like that stance, and the shirt, and the general demeanor. There are two kinds of folks who hang around in the back streets at night, the predator and the prey. Pretty much everything going on in the city can be described as savage, but the other parts of the city at least put up the efforts to package them in gentlemanly guises. Even a cheap hamburger made from whatever unspeakable ingredients is still wrapped in a modern and rich packing, yeah? On the other hand, the back streets at night are filled with raw and blatant barbarity. Not even a layer of crude cover is there to censor this brutality. No deed is forbidden. No one is held responsible. Imagine the most appalling, vulgar, and filthy deed you can think of. I wouldn't dare say beyond your imagination, since I have no idea how insane you might be. But I can guarantee that whatever you're thinking casually happens somewhere in the dark alleys of the back street at night. Despite all that, people still inhabit the back streets. They doggedly struggle and survive in their very own ways here. See, with this in mind, if I, in my fantasy game, my game that I want to someday have and play, and it'll be really cool, I'm not even sure if I necessarily want to make an office that, like, rose through the ranks and became the best office ever. I think my attempt would be like, can we make the back streets less fucking awful? I guess, yeah, maybe my office would lean more towards peacekeeping, which it sounds like in the back streets would be quite an ordeal. Akin to constant combat, basically, but that sounds like a challenge I'd like to try and achieve, and it would be cool if you'd be able to do so. The hand of the back streets is possibly the biggest reason no one dares to take care of the lawless land that is the back street. Oh, interesting. No associations or wings can touch it, and not even the head itself can easily interfere. The 5 syndicates at the apex of the back streets are called the Thumb, the Index, the Middle, the Ring, and the Pinky, namely. They parcel out districts of the back streets and comprehensively manage their territories and periodically hold meetings to efficiently control the back streets. They call this conference the Finger Bow Bell, which they mentioned recently, actually. I'm uncertain as to whether this name is meant to suggest that they actually make pinky swears not to invade each other's territories, or if they call it as such simply because the fingers gather in one place. The mind of higher-ups is a mystery, truly. Going back to the topic, when the Finger Bow Bell nears, all members of the 5 Fingers will try to avoid conflict and refrain from causing big problems. That's why the Thumb was surprised when the Index were kicking the crap out of them and putting them on stakes. It's thanks to the leaders of each syndicate who caution their subordinates that fights between smaller syndicates could grow into a massive conflict between the big ones. Perhaps, if subsidiary syndicates ran into trouble, the seniors at the Finger Bow Bell would be faced with quite the embarrassment now, wouldn't they? As it turns out, the Index does not care. This is interesting to me because that's a direct counter to what I was saying about wanting to be able to try and help the backstreets, and it turns out the Hand would in fact try and stop me from doing that, but I'd like that as a sort of really hard challenge in the game. Of just being one of the only officers, or indeed maybe the only office to actually attempt to fight back against the Hand and the syndicates that they control. That would be fun. I'd enjoy doing that. The Seven Association is a fixer association specializing in investigation and intelligence, and it's knowledgeable in pretty much every affair that takes place in the city. Details about a syndicate gaining infamy in the backstreets of some place. The association probably knows what district it is exactly, but I left before I checked the details of it. All the information revealed about the distortion phenomenon which has been going around lately, when and where fixer offices start up and close business, and the beat goes on. The association treats all kinds of information about the city. Oh, they don't have access to top secret intels like the secrets of singularities each nest holds, obviously speaking. When they solve cases, they usually cooperate with other associations like the Shi and the Liu. If you ask how the Seven Associations can secure its confidentiality despite holding lots of juicy info that could attract the many, it's likely because its staff aren't bad combatants by any means. They don't use fancy but crude workshop weapons that are basically large amalgamations of various technologies. Regular informants are armed with nothing more than a simple bladed tool. It sounds very underwhelming judging from the weapons alone, but they use the minimum technique with pinpoint precision to take down their foes. So you don't fuck with the associations because they are for real and don't fuck around. The likes of Oink probably wouldn't last too long, although I have to say I remember the musicians of Bremen giving us a lot of trouble. They say the backstreets are a nigh inhabitable hellscape, but the people here live on somehow. There's lots of people who live in fear every moment, but the others live a pretty normal life. Some think the backstreets are totally shady and poorly aged slums, but we do have all the amenities we need here. For one, the supermarkets Oink likes aren't as good as those in the nest, but it's got everything people need. Clothing stores, groceries, dry cleaners, etc. I heard the details are different for each district, so there's that. I'm just telling you how things are where I live. People here aren't too unkind to each other. Those nest dwellers like to gossip about how we're cruel and dreary and all that, but the truth is, we're doing just fine. Oh, and there's tons of good restaurants here. It's the street of flavor after all. Freshly baked meat pies, spaghetti made of special pasta. Your tongue and stomach have a wonderful time if you ever go on a trip to our district. We used to hand over the leftovers from our performance here to local restaurants. That meat would go to waste if we left it on the spot. So we might as well give it to people who can make good use of it, ain't that right? When Woof, Doodle Doo, and Hee Haw were around, we got enough chow to share with several eateries, but our find was halved since they were gone, and Oink kept making silly mistakes of it and ruined those ingredients too often, so we quit that biz altogether. Which is a tad bit unfortunate. We sometimes got tasty meals for free when we gave them our meat. So the musicians of Bremen primarily operate in, was it District 22? Is it 22? I can't remember, or 23? The one with the cannibals in it, you know, that one. Yeah. I guess if they're going to be doing their horrible rampagey music-making bullshit, they may as well make some money on the side. Like they say, the meat's just going to go to waste otherwise. Hee Haw, Doodle Doo, Woof, and me. The four of us were moved to the core by the pianist's performance. To recreate the performance half as splendid as what we heard that day, we formed the musicians of Bremen to study the music. We tried flicking strings here and there, playing music while sitting, on our backs, and even while handstanding. We still couldn't come close to the pianist's level, but we managed to make our own brand of music, something that only the musicians of Bremen can play. Our performance was actually pretty fantastic, you know. Sadly, our time didn't last long. One day, a mysterious person approached us and asked us to join his ensemble and perform with him. Woof, Doodle Doo, and Hee Haw took the offer and left with that guy. I had to stay because of new members that had just joined our band, though. Yep, Moo and Oink. It's kinda uncomfortable to just leave them behind, you know? We can't let them mess around and taint our name either. I've been practicing with them to create a performance that could get a standing ovation once my old bandmates come back. But at their current level of skills, the three would just clock at these newbies' performances and go back to whatever they were doing. So yeah, the musicians fell on hard times ever since Woof, Doodle Doo, and Hee Haw left, and I was sure of this at the time, but this stuff does confirm it. Woof, Doodle Doo, and Hee Haw were in fact different people, three separate people, before presumably some distortion shenanigans morphed them into one person, and now they're that horrifying thing we saw in the other episode. Hopefully we're going to start fighting some of these distortions soon, because I want to see how they go. I bet they're really tough, but I want to see it. Basically speaking, people who visit our office are looking for shrewd and precise situational assessment rather than combat prowess. The ability to make quick calculations for various possible scenarios and neutralize or kill the enemy with the least effort. We are hunters of the city. We wedge pierce the requests we get with swiftness and precision. Of course, our office isn't perfect in every regard, so we're in partnership with a number of other offices. Fixer offices often request others for help when reinforcements or professional aid in specific areas is needed. In the case of our office, we were sister offices with Dawn Office, sharing more information than we did with most other partners. Oscar is good friends with Salvador, the man running that office, and they've known each other for quite some time. But there's more to this sisterhood than that. Wedge Office excels at analyzing the capabilities of foes, and Dawn Office specializes in combat, so it's only natural that we go well together. And that's funny, because Wedge Office was a lot tougher than Dawn Office, to be honest. So that's weird, but whatever. But I like the idea that they're kind of intelligence operatives and analysts, and we are hunters of the city. They're really going for the Bloodborne vibe, aren't they? Life insurance for fixers is often a sham. A lot of them take your money never to give it back. Even if you terminate your insurance, they won't. It's not easy for your damage to be insured either. You have to be at death's door to qualify, pretty much. The chances are as low as winning the lottery, and what if you just up and died? What can the dead do with money? You'll be much better off making a savings account for an augment procedure or quality workshop gear. I was a very lucky case. Keep in mind that this isn't the norm at all. Insurance can sometimes be useful depending on its form and conditions, sure, but if you take the pay into account, it still doesn't feel great. Well, you died and came back to life. I don't know how much you can complain, really. But life insurance is an interesting concept, for sure. You pay them, they're like, okay, here's a clone or a body for us to put your head into so that you can just continue as you were. It makes sense, given what the world is like, you know, there's replacements for everything, like when Yan got messed up by the thumb and then they basically fixed him up good as new. The 8 o'clock circus was a real sod of a case. Its leader wasn't a particularly powerful enemy, but it took a long time to assess the strengths and behavior of each of his crew. There was no specific pattern to it, and it was difficult to predict what would come next. It was akin to watching an erratic circus of lunacy. Their lair was mysterious and terrifyingly bleak, and the crew took hideous forms as well, looking too grotesque to possibly be considered normal living beings. They were as strong as they looked. When the blob, shaped like a lion, bit Pamela with its blunt teeth, her body quite literally blew up on the spot. However, our enemies were slowly brought down from the vantage point, and when they were completely cornered, the leader escaped with a few of his crew. Even though we couldn't put an end to the case, we decided to prioritize recovering Pamela's body, as we deemed the circus would be weakened enough to stay low for a while. As we stored Pamela's head in a stasis preservation case and headed to the exit of the collapsing circus tent, we ran into a group of fixers. They seemed rather exhausted after fighting a swarm of the crew outside. I suppose that's why they couldn't enter the tent until that moment. It's not uncommon for 2 or more officers or fixers to be present at the scene of a finished case, so I gently nodded to greet them, identifying ourselves as fixers of Wedge Office who have come here to solve the case. The shortest among them, the aged-looking woman who appeared to be the representative of the group, looked around the circus tent, let out a deep sigh and introduced herself as Moses of Moses Office, while smoking from her pipe. Moses then started thinking, presumably ruminating over what words to choose. She must have taken a request that's rather tricky to disclose. The 2 people behind her, nervously exchanging glances with each other, appeared to be her bodyguards of some sort. Having such trivial thoughts, I waited for this Moses person to resume speaking. After a brief period of silence, Moses breathed out smoke in the other direction and asked me where the leader of the circus went. Since I didn't know much better than them, I told them what I could in brief. They seemed troubled by my unhelpful answer, but they soon accepted it and left. That group reportedly appears every time a case of the distortion is solved. They're allegedly working as the distortion detective, but recent witnesses of their appearance were always followed with a distortion case in the same location. While it's unclear whether they're involved in this case, I believe there's enough reason to be wary of them. So is Moses the distortion detective? I don't know, I haven't read it. I have no idea. I'm going to assume yes. But what's a distortion detective's relevance to distortions other than investigating them? I seem to follow them around. It's been generally advised that I finish Ruina before reading Distortion Detective, so I'm going to do that. And I guess I have to read Wonder Lab eventually, but I'll get around to it, I suppose. But Oscar's cool. I very much like his outfit. He himself is a bit of a prick, but he wasn't entirely wrong about Philip, so I have to give him that. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, that's all I've got time for on the book club today. The next one is going to be rough, isn't it? It's going to be rough. We were just on Urban Plague, we go to Urban Nightmare, and there's a lot. That's not so bad. I can get that done in one video. And then we're on to Star of the City, which is all... this one's going to be long. I'm going to have to cut up Star of the City into multiple episodes. But at the very least, we got Urban Plague done, and it was a pretty interesting one. I'm glad for that. But I digress and I'm rambling. Thank you so much for watching. Special thanks to Sweet Baby Red, MB Alias, Ye Old Man River, Lord Scullington, Jessicitty, Plutonium Pie, Dreamer Ghost, Leper Lullaby, K-Bub, Magic Owl, Peyton Barrett Hill, The Frostbite, Monsoon, Sir World, Jumping with Joy, Warmaster Oku, SCP-106A, Namad, and Kenny T800 for supporting me on Patreon. Thank you so much, guys, and thank you all so much for watching. We're catching up. We're getting there. It's mainly because the series is going a bit slow in terms of, tier progression at the moment because we're doing realizations and each reception is actually quite difficult now and requires a lot of thought, and the battles themselves actually take a really long time, so we're actually getting to catch up a little bit. But I don't know if I'll ever truly be caught up. I just lack the discipline for it. But whatever happens next time, and it will be... I've immediately forgotten what it was. Let me have a look. Urban Nightmare. It will be Urban Nightmare that we'll do next time. And I hope I see you there. Doodles. Goodbye.